Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. During the previous night, either the Russians and the Ukrainians were trying to attack each other using the massive missile strikes and drone strikes. For example, on talking the Russian attempts, we have the map of explosions. As you can see, the main explosions took place in the towns, cities like Kharkov, Poltava, Dnipro, Odessa, and of course in the western part of Ukraine, in the vicinity of the city by the name of Starokonstantinov. So this is the city we are talking about. I'll remind you that this territory, according to information we have, the Ukrainians are using to prepare the airfields for F-16s and many other things, and many other important military infrastructure for Su-24, who can attack the Russian territory with Storm Shadow missiles. So this is the second day, the second time in a row during the week when the Russians were bombing the territory of the city and the territory of this airfield. Furthermore, as we discussed, the explosions took place in Dnipro. We have some videos from the locals who were filming the results of explosions. Of course, the quality of the video doesn't allow us to understand where exactly the explosions took place. Also, there were attempts to attack Odessa. There were very heavy explosions as well. The Ukrainians from their side tried to make combined attack on Crimea, according to at least the understanding of we have, but the Russians are saying that they managed to bring down every single missile that the Ukrainians launched in the direction of Crimea. At some point, the Ukrainians decided to stop any attempts, probably to save, let's say, missiles and to save resources. Furthermore, the Russians published a very interesting video on how they managed to stop another attack on Crimea using the Navy drone. This is probably the first case when a Ukrainian Navy drone was destroyed by the Russian FPV drone, and which is very interesting because of many reasons. And first of all is the distance where exactly the Navy drone was destroyed and what kind of distance the Russian FPV drone managed to bypass until it was able to damage the Ukrainian forces. Another important thing is that more and more countries all over the world is, let's say, allowing the Ukraine to use their weapon to attack the Russian territory. And today, according to information we have, Canada joined this club. Canada allowed the Ukrainians to use their weapon to attack the territory of Russian Federation. And by the beginning of the 30th of May, we have a list of countries that have already allowed doing this. It's United Kingdom, the Baltic states, Netherlands, Poland, Finland, France, Czech Republic, Sweden, and Estonia. As you can see, significant number of lists, and most likely every single country that we just discussed that allowed Ukrainians to use their weapon to attack the territory of Russian Federation, most likely either have already sent their forces on the territory of Ukraine or are going to do this in the very near future. So as you can see, the list is very interesting. There are some countries that obviously is not able to change the situation in the ground, like Baltic states and let's say small countries, but also there are countries, very powerful countries, who have very powerful forces like United Kingdom, France, of course, Poland, of course, which are able to change the situation on the ground, at least maybe not to break, but to improve the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is the first, let's say, wave of the Western forces. Obviously, the waves there are going to be more and more waves in the future. So this is another completely different, let's say, wave of escalation, and the special new military operation is getting to the new phase, to the new stage. Now let's move to Kharkiv direction. More and more sources are saying about possible beginning of Russian offensive operations towards the village, toward the town by the name of Zolochev. We have few updates. We have updates from the Russian sources. The Russians are saying that within the next few days, not weeks, not months, within the next few days, the Russians are going to launch the offensive in direction of Zolochev, and the Ukrainians also, more precisely, the military governor of this Kharkiv direction stated that in a day they are going to start evacuation, complete evacuation of this part of Kharkiv region. So not just Zolochev, but Kazachie, Lopon, Udy, all these towns and settlements will be evacuated according to Ukrainian sources. For now, the Russians are just limiting themselves with aviation strikes, with artillery strikes, with FABs and many other different types of heavy weapon, but without any attempts to cross the border on the ground. Something tells me that the Russians will make a small surprise to Ukrainians, because this is not like operation that was created yesterday or the day before yesterday. The Russians were preparing the plan of creation of this buffer zone, have been preparing this operation for many months, and obviously something big and interesting we are going to see during the next few days. When talking about Liptsy direction, as you can see, we haven't received anything during the previous night. The only interesting report we got is that the Ukrainians concentrated significant number of forces in the vicinity of the town by the name of Liptsy and Slobozhanske, and according to information we have, the Russians are saying that they managed to discover or to capture the negotiations of French, Poland and German officers exactly in the town by the name of Slobozhanska. So this is very interesting that Ukrainians start using the Western soldiers, the Western volunteers on this direction, and it's going to be very interesting. Now let's move to Volchansk area. We still haven't received any updates confirming the Russian complete control over the southern part of the North Volchansk. The only thing we have is how the Russians continue bombing the citadel in the central part, which confirms that Ukrainians still have the presence there and that they still control the territory. Some sources, some pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of unexpected offensive operation that was conducted by the Russians, the Russian forces managed to establish control over the first high-rise buildings in the area. So this building, and this building were captured by the Russians during the previous night. At least it was stated by some Russian and pro-Russian resources. Now let's move further to the Kupiansk direction. We have a lot of updates. We have a lot of geolocations during the night, and this is the first combat area. As you can see, just during one night we received significant number of geolocations confirming the Russian activity on the line Kislovka-Kotlerovka-Kupiansk. On this video we see another attack on pontoon bridge, or just the bridge that located along a Skol river. As a result of attack, the bridge was destroyed. Probably this is the old video that we've seen yesterday. Maybe this is not the old, but it's the video is completely different. Maybe the same, let's say, explosion, but from another angle. When talking about Kislovka-Kotlerovka, the Russians continue pummeling the Ukrainian forces in their positions along the railways and in the area of Stepovo-Novoselka. For now, they're just limiting themselves with artillery preparation strikes, but most likely in the very near future, the Russians will begin the ground offensive. And the same story we can see on the second direction, and we are talking about Mesazharevka-Stelmachovka. Also, lots of very heavy explosions along Kaskol River, and of course, effective counter-artillery duels where the Ukrainians are losing, let's say, artillery systems. Now let's move further to the south. We haven't received anything about Sivers direction during the night, as well as almost nothing about Chasov Yar. Just few important things in the vicinity of Klishevka. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Russians, as a result of unexpected attack, managed to establish complete control over this tree line, getting closer and closer to Ukrainian positions in the area of this rich network of the fortifications. During the previous night and during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians made few attempts to counterattack the Russian forces, trying to use the same tactics with the tanks, but the Ukrainians weren't so successful as the Russians were during their attack. And during the Ukrainian attempt to attack, their tank, when entered the line of combat contact, was damaged by probably FPV drones, and then there was a secondary detonation and the Ukrainians lost the tank. So this is the Ukrainian attempt, completely unsuccessful and without any progress. Well, furthermore, we see additional updates of how the Russians start pummeling and bombing the Ukrainian positions further to the west of Klishevka, which confirms that they're moving focus. You know that this is very important evidence of Russian progress, to see and to follow the movements of Russian focus. Every time the Russians moving focus further to the west means additional progress somewhere in the east. So we see that now the Russians are bombing the tree lines further from Klishevka, which confirms that Klishevka most likely, as discussed in the previous updates, was captured by the Russians. Now let's move to Avdiivka. According to some Russian sources, the Russians continue moving in Novoalexandrovka, and now the people are saying that the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to reach the lake inside of Novoalexandrovka. So there is like a river, more precisely river. This is a small lake, this one, and there is a very small river that goes to, let's say, eastern part of Novoalexandrovka, and this river begins somewhere here. And according to the sources, the Russians managed to reach almost the central part of the village itself. So significant progress. For now, we're not going to change the map. We need something more reliable. Clashes continues between Sokol and Solovyova, the Ukrainians hunting the Russian forces with FPV drones. The Russians are hunting the Ukrainian forces. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to evacuate their armored vehicles, but the Russians managed to get and to destroy another Bradley on this area. Now let's move further to the south. We have additional updates from Karlovka-Nitailova area. For the first time probably since the beginning of battle on this area, the Russians start focusing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in Karlovka. The first FAB start arriving in this area. We haven't seen them before. There were just explosions on the bridge. Maybe a few times we saw some FABs or some artillery strikes, but as I understand, due to the fact that the Russians captured Nitailova completely, we're gonna see the moving of the focus further to the west. So another evidence of movements of Russian focus that confirms additional Russian progress. Also, we have very interesting report from different mappers confirming that the Russians managed to cross Vodiana River and to answer this, let's say, tree line on the northwestern part of Nitailova. So according to different mappers, this territory was captured by the Russians during the previous night, and this is very important progress, a very important advance of the armed Russian forces in the, let's say, in the global scope to establish complete control over the village by the name of Yasnobrodovka. So that was the Russian progress, and very important one, to tell the truth. We haven't received anything from Krasnogorlovka, some progress, additional progress of the Russian forces in Pobeda. The Russians managed to clear the tree line, this tree line, and to get as close as possible to this network of Ukrainian fortifications. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russian forces along this tree line, which confirms the Russian control. Konstantinovka, Novomikhailov, another day without any updates. Ugledar, no updates, and Staromayorska, Urozhaina, just one video of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in the northern part of the village by the name of Staromayorska, which also confirms additional Russian progress and additional Russian attempts to attack further to the north. Most likely today we're going to receive additional updates and final updates about the village itself. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.